Welcome to your deep dive. Today we're diving into World War II,
Yes.
specifically 1940 to 42. You've given us a really fascinating mix of sources, historical documents, a fictional thriller, all hinting at a secret operation codenamed Cassius.
And it's a good thing you brought your curiosity because these sources, they really paint a picture of Britain in crisis. You know, imagine, if you will, the fall of France, the Battle of Britain raging in the skies above, and this very real threat of a German invasion.
Okay, so let's unpack this a little bit. So the Battle of Britain is raging, right? We've got Spitfires, Messerschmitts, duking it out. But here's the thing. Even if Britain wins the air battle, they're on their last legs. Supplies are low, U-boats are sinking ships faster than they can be replaced, and the possibility of German troops landing on British shores is very, very real at this point.
It's a desperate situation, and that's what makes this possibility of Cassius, this secret operation that's hinted at in your sources, so intriguing. I mean, what lengths would someone go to when their back is against the wall, when the enemy seems unstoppable?
Which brings us to our first piece of the puzzle, a real-life document that really jumped out from your sources, the McCollum Memo.
Right. This memo, written in October of 1940 by U.S. Naval Captain Arthur McCollum, this is not your average historical footnote.
No, not at all. First, it lays out in black and white the threat Japan posed to U.S. interests in the Pacific. And this is over a year before Pearl Harbor, so the alarm bells weren't exactly ringing for everyone in Washington.
Exactly. But McCollum, he goes beyond simply stating the threat. He urges the U.S. to prepare for war with Japan, and here's where it gets really interesting. He suggests actions that could be interpreted as provoking Japan into making the first move.
So was McCollum a visionary? Was he a lone wolf howling about a distant storm? Or could this memo be a sign of something bigger, something connected to this Cassius operation we're trying to unravel?
To your point, we do have that fictional account you shared, which suggests the British were desperate to pull the U.S. into the war. And we know from history that the U.S. entering the war would be a game changer. So could McCollum's memo, with its almost prophetic warnings and audacious suggestions, be a piece of that puzzle?
Let's say it is. Let's just try that on for a moment.
Yeah.
If McCollum was part of some larger strategy, it paints a picture of the British being willing to play a very, very dangerous game.
It certainly raises questions. Was the memo meant to be intercepted? Was McCollum a pawn in a much larger game? And if so, how far did this web of intrigue spread?
It's like we've stumbled into a spy thriller. And speaking of spy thrillers, your sources also included some fascinating details about British deception operations during the war.
Yes, the lengths to which they went to mislead the Germans, it's straight out of a movie. Dummy tanks, fake airfields, even turning German spies against their own. They pulled out all the stops.
Okay, hold on. We have to talk about Agent Tricycle. I mean, talk about a code name.
It sounds almost comical, right? Giving a double agent, someone entrusted with vital secrets, a code name based on, shall we say, a personal quirk.
It's like something a screenwriter would come up with and think, nah, that's too unbelievable. But it makes you think, what was the strategy there? Was it intentional? A way to discredit anything Agent Tricycle might reveal if caught. A way to sow confusion within the German ranks. Or, and this is a chilling thought, was it a way to send a message to the Germans without them even realizing it?
The human mind during wartime, it's fascinating and terrifying, isn't it? But you're right to focus on the strategy because every move, even seemingly absurd ones like Agent Tricycle, had implications.
It makes you question, in this world of smoke and mirrors, how did anyone know what was real?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it leads us to another intriguing piece of this puzzle, the Brooke-Popham memo.
Right. This memo, mentioned briefly in your sources, was lost when the SS Automedon, a British merchant ship, was sunk by a German raider. On the surface, a tragic but all too common event in war.
Yeah.
Ships sink, right?
Except this wasn't just any ship carrying any cargo. The Brooke-Popham memo, according to your fictional account, contained highly sensitive information about British defenses in the Far East.
Which begs the question, why on earth would the British risk sending something so important on a merchant ship in the middle of a war zone, knowing full well the danger?
Exactly. It doesn't make sense unless it was intentional. Could it have been a deliberate sacrifice? Maybe even a ploy to mislead the Germans about British strength or intentions in the Pacific? Remember, Japan's role in the war is just heating up at this point.
So we have a memo that could light a fire under the Americans, and a lost memo that might be a carefully planted seed of disinformation. And somewhere in the midst of all of this, is this Operation Cassius, looming like a shadow.
A shadow cast by some of the most influential figures of the time, including Anthony Eden.
Eden, as in the British Foreign Secretary Anthony Eden. What's his connection to all of this?
He's more than just a connection, he's a central figure. Eden was deeply involved in intelligence operations during the war and a key player in shaping Britain's strategy. He was known for his intellect, his diplomatic skills, and perhaps most importantly in this context, his pragmatism.
Pragmatism.
Yes, and according to the fictional account you shared, a willingness to consider any and all options to ensure Britain's survival, even if those options were, shall we say, morally complex.
Which is fascinating, considering his earlier stance against appeasement. It makes you wonder, did those early experiences with Hitler, with the very real threat of fascism spreading across Europe, fundamentally change his worldview? Did they push him to a point where the ends justified the means?
And if so, did he view Cassius as a necessary evil? A gamble worth taking with potentially global consequences.
Okay, so far we've got a potential U.S.-Japan powder keg, elaborate defection operations, a mysteriously lost memo, and a British foreign secretary wrestling with impossible choices. Where do we even go from here?
Well, I think it's time we take a closer look at that fictional account of Operation Cassius, particularly the meeting, because if we want to understand the why, we need to understand the who, the when, and the how.
All right, so let's dive into this meeting. It's described as a first-hand account, right? Someone claiming to have been in the room where it happened.
That's right. And while we always have to take, accounts like this with a grain of salt, especially when anonymity is involved, they can offer a really valuable glimpse into the mindset of those making decisions at the highest level.
So set the scene for us. Who's in the room? What's the mood like?
Well, the account describes a gathering of Churchill's closest advisors, convened by Anthony Eden himself shortly after the Battle of Britain. The mood is, well, tense, to say the least. Britain had just stared down the Luftwaffe and lived to tell the tale, but the victory felt, Pyrrhic. Resources were stretched thin, the public was weary, and the threat of invasion still loomed large.
You can practically feel the weight of the world on their shoulders.
Absolutely. And according to the account, the situation was so dire that surrender, unthinkable as it might seem, was actually on the table.
Wow.
Just imagine being in that room to even entertain the thought of surrendering to Hitler.
It must have been a gut-wrenching moment. But they didn't surrender, obviously.
Yeah.
So what shifted the conversation?
That's where Operation Cassius, or at least the seeds of it, come into play. The account describes a plan, considered radical even by wartime standards, to leverage Japan's growing ambitions in the Pacific. The goal, to maneuver the U.S. into a conflict with Japan, thus forcing them to engage on two fronts and alleviate the pressure on Britain.
Hold on. Isn't this starting to sound a lot like what we read in the McCollum memo? Is it possible that those seemingly outlandish suggestions weren't so outlandish after all?
Yeah.
That McCollum was, in fact, echoing a strategy being debated in the highest levels of British intelligence?
It's a tantalizing possibility. But here's where the fictional account and the historical record intersect in a fascinating way. The account describes those present at the meeting expressing serious reservations about the plan. Even those who found it strategically appealing acknowledged the enormous risks involved. After all, they were essentially talking about playing with fire, potentially igniting a global conflict on a scale no one could predict.
So even within this inner circle, there was disagreement, debate, maybe even fear about the potential consequences of such a bold move.
Absolutely. And I think that's an important detail to remember, especially when we look back at history and see these grand narratives. Behind those narratives, behind the decisions that shaped the world, were individuals wrestling with impossible choices, often with limited information and under unimaginable pressure.
It humanizes the whole situation, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It reminds us that history isn't just a series of events, but a collection of very, very human stories, each with its own complexities.
Precisely. And while we may never know the full truth about Operation Cassius or the extent to which the McCollum memo reflects that strategy, what we do know is that both speak to the desperate lengths to which nations and the individuals who lead them will go to ensure their survival.
It makes you wonder, though, about the cost of such desperation. Even if Cassius was real and contributed to the Allied victory, could such a morally complex operation be justified? And what were the long-term ramifications of those choices? Did the seeds of future conflicts, even the Cold War, get sown in those desperate hours of 1940?
Those are questions historians continue to debate. And it's that very debate, that wrestling with the nuances of the past that makes studying history so compelling. It's not about memorizing dates and names, but about grappling with the choices made and the paths not taken.
It's about understanding that history isn't some fixed point in the past,
Yeah.
but a living, breathing thing that continues to shape the world we live in today.
Exactly. And speaking of the present, there's another fascinating layer to the story we haven't even touched on yet. Remember that anonymous personal account of the meeting?
How could I forget? It's like something out of a spy novel.
Well, the fact that it surfaced at all these years later raises some intriguing questions.
What are you getting at?
Why remain anonymous after all this time? And perhaps more importantly, why release this information now? What's motivation?
It's like this person, this witness to history, was holding on to this secret, waiting for the right moment to whisper it to the world. But why? What was their goal?
It's the ultimate historical cliffhanger, isn't it? And unfortunately, like many good mysteries, this one might not have a neat and tidy answer.
But we can speculate. Could this be about, setting the record straight, offering a different perspective on a pivotal moment in history? Or, and this is a bit more unsettling, could it be about manipulating the present by revealing secrets of the past?
Those are all possibilities, and they really speak to the enduring power of history. Even decades later, the events of World War II continue to fascinate, to haunt, and to influence how we see the world today.
It makes you realize that history isn't just about, dusty textbooks and faded photographs. It's a living, breathing thing that continues to shape our lives in ways we might not even realize.
Precisely, and as we've seen today, sometimes the most incredible stories are the ones that blur the line between fact and fiction, leaving us with more questions than answers.
So where does that leave us? What are we supposed to take away from all of this? We've got this shadowy Operation Cassius, tantalizing hints and clues, but no smoking gun.
I think the takeaway is the journey itself.
Yeah.
By diving deep into these sources, by following the threads of history, you've uncovered something truly, truly fascinating. You've glimpsed the hidden machinations, the desperate gambles, and the moral dilemmas faced by those who lived through one of the most tumultuous periods in human history.
It's been a crash course in wartime espionage, deception on a grand scale, and the weight of leadership when the fate of nations hangs in the balance.
And it highlights, a crucial aspect of history, the importance of digging deeper, of questioning the official narrative, and of being open to the possibility that there's always more to the story than meets the eye.
It's like we've been handed pieces of a puzzle, some fitting together neatly, others leaving gaps and raising more questions.
Yeah.
But even without the complete picture, we've gained a deeper understanding of the forces that shaped our world.
Exactly. And perhaps in the end, that's the most rewarding part of exploring history. It's not about finding all the answers, but about embracing the mystery, the complexity, and the enduring power of the past.
Well said. This deep dive into Operation Cassius has been a wild ride. We've journeyed through historical documents, a fictional thriller, and even a personal account that surfaced after all these years. And while we might not have, definitive answers, the questions we've uncovered, the glimpses into the shadowy world of wartime espionage, those are what make history so captivating.
Indeed. History is not a stagnant thing, but a conversation, a constant process of discovery and reevaluation. And sometimes the most intriguing discoveries are those that leave us wanting to know more.
So to you listening, we leave you with this. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and never stop seeking the truth, no matter how elusive it may seem. Who knows what other secrets history is still waiting to reveal.